Welcome to Secure Freedom Radio. This is Frank Gaffney, your host and guide for what I think of as an intelligence briefing in the war for the free world. It is a delight always to have a chance to talk with the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee's Readiness Subcommittee. His name is Rob Wittman. He represents the people of the 1st District of Virginia, where we've caught up with him today, I'm very pleased to say. He brings uncommon intelligence to the business of national defense, and it is a subject on which I know he's passionate, and we're deeply appreciative of his leadership. Congressman, welcome back. Good to have you with us, sir.
Frank, it's an honor and a privilege to be back with you.
You know, I thought of you immediately when I saw the other day a report that indicated of the 10 aircraft carriers that we have in the fleet these days, we only have 5 of them ready to be at sea and engage in operations, and none of them at the moment is assigned to the Middle East at a moment when, for reasons you know better than I, there is a lot of ferment taking place. As the chairman of the Shipbuilding Caucus, as a member of the Sea Power Subcommittee, as well as the chairman of the Readiness Committee, what do you make of this state of affairs, Congressman, the adequacy of our carrier battle groups to the tasks we're giving them?
Well, we absolutely need to have a full complement of 11 aircraft carriers, Frank. Today, as you know, we only have 10, which requires at some time not to have a presence in certain critical areas of the world. And obviously having a carrier in CENTCOM, in the Central Command, which would be there in the North Arabian Sea in that area, I think is critical when we have these periods of fairly short duration, but still an absence of U.S. presence there. It does create a challenge, and it's one of those things that we talk about constantly about the continued need to build aircraft carriers. It's our forward presence, and as we reduce base structure around the world, the only way we project forward presence is with those aircraft carriers. So it's important to make sure we stay on track and building new ones. The Gerald R. Ford will be delivered to the Navy in 2016, but remember, it will take that carrier a little short of 4 years before it becomes operational. That's because it's the newest carrier in a class, and a lot of testing has to go in to make sure that when it goes on deployment, it's ready to go. So that also elongates the time where we're going to be effectively with 10 carriers, and we have what's called a 2+3. That is 2 carriers forward deployed, 1 in the Central Command, 1 in the Pacific Command, and then 3 ready to go in case, and then they rotate what's called tiered readiness. So in order to have the ability to surge if necessary, you have to have 11 because you always have one that's undergoing a refueling, one that's undergoing significant shipyard work, and time, too, for the sailors to rest, and then they have to retrain and get back. So, folks look at it and go, well, gosh, why with 11 carriers do we only have, it would be 6 forward deployed there, but now with 10, we only have 5. That's the challenge it creates for us, and the world doesn't wait around and say, well, we'll wait for a carrier to come out of the yard. We see things happening in the South China Sea, in the North Arabian Gulf, all those areas around the world. These threats continue, and U.S. presence is the way that we deter bad behavior, but also can respond in many ways to keep things from accelerating to points where it becomes very, very problematic for us.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about the South China Sea, Congressman Rob Wittman, because, of course, this is a place where we're seeing what I think has to be regarded as provocative behavior by the Chinese as they're manufacturing islands and fortifying them and then declaring them to be basically keep-out zones, whether they're anxious to have the resources or to control, navigation through very important waters, as you know. Talk about, what it means for us not to have a regular presence, let alone a permanent presence in those waters, to contest and, as you say, to deter possible bad behavior.
Well, we have to have the presence there, Frank, and we do have agreements with countries in the region, from Australia to Singapore, and I've visited the Philippines a number of times. They have a strong desire to have a U.S. Navy presence there. They want to improve the Subic Bay facility so that we can berth ships there. They understand the importance of U.S. naval presence within that particular area. And it's the only way that we can realistically contest, as you said, the areas that China claims for itself. They're taking islands, the Spratly Islands, that belong to the Philippines, reclaiming those islands, which means they're pumping sand, building large land structures out of what are just tiny outcroppings of land in the South China Sea. And from that, too, they're improving those islands. So they're putting facilities on there that can support ships. There's only one reason you do that, and that is to be able to project that power into the Pacific. What we have to do is to contest that area under the International Treaty of the Seas. Those islands are not considered sovereign territories. So we can sail our warships within 12 miles of the borders of those islands, and we must do that because absent that, we then capitulate to China, and what they will claim is, well, nobody's contesting our claim, therefore it is. And we must understand that China is going to be aggressive. They're going to push the limits of what they believe their claims to be, even if it's counter to international law. And the United States is the only country, I think, on the face of the earth that can successfully contest China's claim in that area. And that means naval presence. And as you know, one of the things I've advocated for is a robust Navy, and we don't have enough ships now to have presence and to counter these threats around the world. And you know, it's not just China, it's Russian presence now, especially with their new class of nuclear submarines. So those threats continue to materialize around the world.
We're going to be talking momentarily with Bill Gertz, who's been breaking stories about a new submarine drone. Let me ask you about one other issue in your large portfolio. The Natural Resources Committee is another that you serve on. President Obama, of course, since we last talked, has decided to block the construction of the Keystone XL pipeline in the United States. What are your thoughts on the implications of that decision, and will Congress try to overturn it?
Well, I know Congress will take every effort to allow the Keystone pipeline to be built, although it is an executive permitting process that allows that to happen. But I think there are some actions that Congress can take, at least in the meantime, to keep the issue in the forefront of people's minds. It's hard for us to circumvent the decision that's made by the president, but it doesn't mean that we can't continue to keep it in the forefront. And hopefully the next president will look at this differently. I think it's very problematic, Frank. It's problematic from an economic standpoint and the economic impact that it has in the United States. If there's a safety issue there, we know that oil can still come to the United States. It can come here on rail cars, and we've seen in recent history some of the disasters that have happened with the transportation of petroleum products on rail cars. So there's a safety issue there, and of course I would argue also an environmental issue there, with it being much less safe to transport it by rail car than it would be by pipeline. There's an energy independence component of that to make sure that we have the ability to produce energy for this nation to meet our demands. And a close partner like Canada that's willing to sell oil to us rather than countries in the Middle East, to me, it makes strategic sense to have that, not only with Canada as a partner, but to have that petroleum that we need in this country and refine it here to make sure we are less dependent on oil from nations that don't like us.
I couldn't agree more. Congressman, we have less than a minute with you. I just wanted to ask, going back to what might happen to that oil if we don't bring it here, is it will go to China. It might be used in a way that is even more damaging to the environment than it would be the case here. One of the things that is, of course, in play at the moment, speaking of carriers, is Ash Carter, the Secretary of Defense, has suggested that the Trans-Pacific Partnership would be worth a carrier to the United States military because it will keep China out and help shore up our position in the Pacific. Have you taken a position on the TPP, and what do you make of that particular line of reasoning?
Well, Frank, as you know, recently the TPP has become available for us to read, and I am going through it, but I can tell you in my beginning examination of that, I have deep concerns and reservations about the TPP. And Frank, the only thing that replaces an aircraft carrier is an aircraft carrier. And while Ash Carter may make assertions of what an agreement might do, there's nothing that replaces that sovereign 4.5 acres of U.S. sovereignty other than a United States aircraft carrier.
Amen. We need more of them. We appreciate, again, what you're trying to do to make sure the ones we have are ready and the ones that we need are getting built. Congressman Rob Wittman of the 1st District of Virginia, keep up that good work, sir. God bless you, and we'll talk with you again very soon. Kevin Freeman joins us next. We'll talk about economic warfare and more right after this.